America is not a homogeneous, closed monolith as we tend too often to believe from a distance. It is a living and a shifting reality traversed by various currents that often collide. Simone de Beauvoir wrote this during her extensive traveling throughout the U.S. This comment not only portrays an external view of America, but simultaneously a view from within. Further, her assertion applies something else below the surface, something below the level of the image America holds for itself, Europe, and the rest of the world. Hi, my name's Will Stock. You might not know me because typically I'd be on the other side of this camera filming all the videos on Crit Focus. But today's episode, we're going to be looking at my major research project, which I finished for graduate school up in Toronto. I have an MFA in documentary media, and part of that project was a photo book, a documentary film, a number of prints, and finally a thesis paper. But for this video, since you guys are here for photography, I'm going to be mostly focusing on the photo book and talking about some of the theory and philosophy that went into it. I'll do a little flip through, we can analyze it together, and I'll talk about some of the choices I made while I was producing it. We'll wrap up the video by talking about what I learned as an artist making this project. All right, let's take a look. All right, so here we go. Here's the book. Opening page, perfect place. So the title page. Let me go over to here. The title page plus my name, and then a little. So here's the introduction. If you want to pause and zoom in, you can go ahead and read this. I'm not going to read all this here because we want to look at pictures. We don't want to read. So here's the opening. Spread, full bleed. The idea here with this image, with these bricks, I'm trying to comment on this idea of a constructed image. Images and symbols are a construction, and they're often built brick by brick until they have this wall here. And so by entering the book, you're kind of moving past the wall of the image. The first image in the book, first actual image, it's this flag painted onto a building. There's a cat in the window here. So this is a reference to the opening picture in Robert Frank's The Americans. You all probably know it. It's the black and white photo in New Jersey. The flag is sort of on the outside of the building. It's covering up the woman's face, and it sort of has this idea of the nation, blinding. But now, instead of the flag being on the exterior of the building, it's become part of the architecture. It's so ingrained with our culture. It's no longer this exterior blinding force, but rather it's been completely engulfed into us. Again, the flag, this time sort of painted on top of the roof here, again, a part of the architecture of the house itself, making this idea and this claim that this symbol of the flag and its representation is really become such an ingrained part of our cultural society. So this photo is actually one that I ended up printing in the gallery and is very important for the work in general. So if you work at Best Buy, this is the perfect place to live. If you don't work at Best Buy, this is still the perfect place to live. And so again, this is sort of the first instance of this utopian ideal coming to terms with the book or within the photos. And again, using architecture and symbols on the architecture to sort of show how this utopianism sort of pervades our cultural intelligibility, right? Because if you work at Best Buy, this is the perfect place to live. But if you don't work at Best Buy, this is still the perfect place to live. Whereas this sort of idea that this is the dream utopia, regardless of who you are and what you believe in, this is the place for you, and anyone or anybody can make it here regardless of who they are to begin with. Because at the end of the day, they can become an American. And to be an American is utopia in itself. So I've done this throughout the book, these sort of graphic representations, and this is sort of this repetition serves to sort of get people to think twice If you look at this photo, you're like, okay, like maybe, I get it. But then I ask you again to look at it again, to reread and to reconsider. And by forcing you to look at it twice, its importance is elevated, right? And then here, it's an image from the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, this sort of beautiful, idyllic, again, utopian image, showcasing this sort of sublime energy that you can experience when you're out in the country and looking for this sort of scene. This photo specifically references old paintings of Albert Bierstadt, who painted a lot of Wild West and pioneer manifest destiny images, and was sort of known to create these very romantic, sublime paintings. I'll put a few up here so you can see. The full bleeds in the book often act as chapter headings. So this is sort of like the first chapter, and this is the next chapter. And I sort of use these full bleeds to sort of separate the book's themes that you'll see as we go on. This is a spread in the book that I'm, after having finished it, I don't think I would have done this spread again. I shot a number of Super 8 rolls while I was making this project that I had planned to put into the documentary film, and I just simply didn't end up doing that. And so I was trying to find a way to use all the Super 8 that I shot, and so I thought by putting it in here, it would kind of add some sort of difference or some sort of variety in the way the images were presented. But, looking at it now, this is one of the decisions I probably would have not made if I were to do this over again. But I think this image, the dream in and its sort of abandoned state is sort of how, the American dream is still sort of alive in its sort of symbol, right? The post here is still here. This idea of the dream is still sort of zombified in its abandoned state. There's all this debris and all this, decrepitude around this, but the sort of idea still remains, even if the, actuality of it is no longer there. It's become a hollow symbol. I ended up printing these two as a diptych in the gallery installation. This is the geographic center of the United States, I guess the lower 48. And at the very center is this church called the U.S. Center Chapel. And it's about the size of, maybe just smaller than this room here. And inside of it is this one, the exterior and the interior. And it's the strangest place, at the very center of our country is this tiny church, And so in reality, it sort of symbolizes what is at the center of our country is this idea of religion. And what does that mean, So I'm not going to reveal everything, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And so that's why I've got two of them here, just because I couldn't leave the viewer with just this exterior photo. I had to add the interior just so you can get the full understanding of why this is so important. You've probably noticed there's not too many portraits in the book. In actuality, I wasn't shooting portraits. I just wasn't comfortable shooting portraits when I started making this. And throughout my journey, I actually got more comfortable taking photos of other people. And so my initial sort of idea was, okay, how can I justify this lack of portraits, which I'll talk about later in my theory and philosophy section. This is Bobby. He talked to me. He said, I was in worse shape than most people, and the music behind him is so loud I can barely hear him. He says, I used to drink, do drugs, alcohol, and I didn't think a thing about it, because why not? So I said, well, Lord, I'll make a deal with you. If you can take the desire for this stuff out of my body, I won't pick up by habit ever again. He did that to me, so I never did again. Although a complete stranger, he tells me he's proud of me, proud of what I'm doing. He shows me a sign that reads, while looking for a deal, do not overlook the best deal in history, and it's free. So I ask him what it means to be free, and he replies, it means you got nothing else to lose. So he's giving out free Bibles. Can't really tell from the glare, but yeah, he's got free Bibles here. And I actually talked to Bobby a number of times. So this interview was on video. I filmed an interview with him on video. but it was so loud that I actually couldn't use it in the film. And so I wanted to use it because I thought it was pretty powerful what he says. So I kind of, added some of my own interpretations, or I guess reflections, and put this here as like a little diary entry. And, after I had filmed him, I went back a day after and I took this photo of him. This is a friend of mine, James, and this is in Minneapolis. And, this book sort of comes out of the impetus of the George Floyd uprising. And so I wanted to try and like talk about that a little bit. I don't think I was very successful, but this is like an attempt that I think, it doesn't work for me, but maybe other people like it. The antithesis of James's portrait is this portrait of this old flagpole salesman. Again, this was taken towards the end of the project, but I just, thought it to be so profound that here's this character wearing the very thing that he's peddling, and he's sort of the salesman of this sort of national symbol. And here he is sort of adorned in it and very content and pleased with himself. Another diary entry, and working into another chapter. This, this is at a Hamel Rodeo in Minnesota. And here we have the bad symbol, the sort of simulation symbol. So here's the real Mount Rushmore and how small and far away it is. And then here's a fake Mount Rushmore at a mini golf course that's sort of idealized, and so some of these sort of bad symbols, or these sort of false simulated symbols, are often more romanticized and look a lot better than, the actual symbol itself. And again, instead of the Statue of Liberty, I have this small Statue of Liberty that's actually in the middle of nowhere. This is hours from anything. It is in the complete middle of Kansas. There's nothing around this. I actually got pulled over coming to this, going 2 miles over the speed limit because the cops in the town were so bored. And again, referencing these presidential, these men made out of stone. We have Kennedy, Reagan, and George W. Bush. They seemingly have nothing to do with each other. So why these three, and how do they relate to, Mount Rushmore, and so these other sort of idyllic people that have sort of contributed to our past. Ronald Reagan's childhood home. I know this might be a little bit more of an obscure image, but I wanted to sort of comment on this idea of, these sort of people in history, these presidents or whatnot, kind of serve as these sort of specters of our history. And they sort of have these very deep, important presences in how our country has evolved. But at some point, they were just normal people. They were just kids. And they really had no sort of power over our ideas or our ideologies. And they sort of transformed into these iconic symbols. And so I wanted to give this idea that, icons and symbols sort of don't always have the same meaning, right? And they sometimes start from one way and end up another way. And again, going into this childhood home idea, we have John Wayne's childhood home. And Ronald Reagan, John Wayne often are sort of thought of in the same sort of symbolic idea, and sort of moving with this like Western cowboy theme, and how this icon of the cowboy has sort of pervaded our cultural intelligence. Here's the cowboy on the horse surrounded by iron horses, these machines that have like come to like, by all means, like replace the horse in its use factor. Now, again, coming back to this built architecture, these bricks, these images of the land can often still be, idealized, just like images of the flag. This is a photo. I stayed with an indigenous woman who let me park my car on her property and let me take a photo of her horses. Again, working through this sort of very idyllic and romanticized imagery of the West, and how the West has sort of been this cultural space where a lot of our ideologies have sort of been born out of. Again, another Robert Frank reference here, the tarp with the car, sort of putting this book in line with a tradition of photography throughout history. I don't want to say like, oh, I'm just remaking their old work, but I do want to say that on the timeline, a lot of these photographers have worked, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatnot. My work comes I made this in 2022. And so mine is just, another sort of document on this timeline and sort of contributes to this bigger tradition. Here's another full bleed, one of these cars that you often see throughout the US with, a number of pro-America stickers and other, sort of slogans, again, parked in the handicap spot. Then here, this is one of my favorite photos. This is outside the museum. They're using an old bomb fin as an ashtray, so the symbol of violence has now become banal. It's just an ashtray, but what do bombs sort of create? They create ash, once they've destroyed things. And so it's got this like beautiful metaphor like all wrapped up into it. And like, although its depiction and its meaning is somewhat somber, just how poetic it comes together, I was really interested in. Classic guns photo. Can't really do an America project without a guns photo. Boom. Big guns. Again, the sort of collision of symbols. It's this sort of like all these different things, all these words sort of colliding into this like collage of meanings, loans, apartments, Geico insurance, everything, and then the flag. So this is another spread that I really enjoy, is commenting on this idea of seeing through something. So, seeing through all these little viewing devices, the monument is far away, but when you see through the viewing device, you can sort of see a lot closer up. Similarly, with this sort of landscape, it's sort of framed through the window. And so these sort of pieces of glass sort of frame our vision and frame the way we see things and our perspective. This is the sort of last quote here. I feel like I'm out here searching for something and I don't really know what it is. It's some sort of elusive American feeling. I have no idea what it is that I'm looking for, but I know it's out there. I've traveled so far into so many places in hopes of finding a trace of this thing, yet so far I've been unsuccessful. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that I can't find what I'm looking for. I don't want to say it's the American dream, but maybe it is. So this is probably one of the most powerful images in the book that I sort of just happened across. I was staying at a motel in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was like one of the most seedy places I think I've ever been to in my life. But I got there just as the sun was setting, and that was sort of perfect time for me to like take photos. And I'm now taking photos of the motel. I was thinking I'd use it earlier in the book with the motel section. But then across the street, I see this sort of A-frame building, and it's called the Eagle's Nest, and it's a bar. And I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. That is the symbol, the A-frame sort of like America, the structure, and it's called the Eagle's Nest. We think about the eagle as our national bird. America is sort of the eagle's nest in a way. And so here is, the goal or the grail photo that I had been searching for the entire time. I printed this pretty large in my gallery installation, but yeah, this is the piece de la resistance photograph that I took while I was out there. And this is sort of one of the stories about, my interactions at the Eagle's Nest and some of the people I met there. And then finally, sort of a self-portrait. That's me. And finishing up here, with all these people, they're sort of looking off into the distance, like looking off where? Into the future, maybe. But the flag is at half-mast, what does that mean? What does it mean to have our country be at half-mast, and looking away from us as the viewer? And this is the final image. So, here again, this is another one of my most, I think probably one of my best images I made during this project. That's why I ended the book with it. I wanted to end with something powerful, something kind of epic, something that had sort of visual and metaphorical substance. I just love that there's all these little stories sort of happening in this image. And down here, which is like a light from the rodeo, sort of looks like this beam, right? And here, this kid with the flag on his shirt, and this little kid, he's sort of braced against this beam of light. What is the light? I guess I think of it as this future, as this sort of next step, wherever we're going. And again, these people don't confront the audience. We see them from behind. We're sort of looking, they're looking off into the future, and we're sort of observing them from this lower angle. And so thinking about, where the camera is and where I've sort of situated you as the viewer is very important throughout the whole piece, but it definitely is important in this photo specifically. And here's the end. This is all the places I went to and kind of the loop I went. A big thing for me before embarking on this quest was I wanted to create work that had some basis in theory. I spent a lot of time reading tons of books and researching authors who had written about the topics I wanted to explore as it relates to the US. One of the biggest influences on the photographs was French cultural theorist Jean Baudrillard. You may know him from his book Simulacra and Simulation, which was part of the inspiration for the film The Matrix. Anyways, moving on. Photographs, although only having a few straightforward portraits, the central characters are actually far more abstract. Primarily drawing from the cultural theories developed by Baudrillard in his book America, the photographs complicate traditional readings of symbolic characters of national identity through the use of irony and metaphor. Baudrillard writes, "America is neither dream nor reality. It is a hyper-reality. It is a hyper-reality because it is a utopia which has behaved from the very beginning as though it were already achieved. Everything here is real and pragmatic, and yet is all the stuff of dreams too." While producing the photographs, I used this quote from Baudrillard to guide my vision. As such, many of the primary characters in the photo book can be seen through this hyper-real lens, attempting to counter the pervasive utopian ideals in American imagery. Through my semiotic analysis of American identity, my goal is to push the viewer to recognize that images and ideals are often not what they seem. In a lot of cases, things we hold as iconic or idyllic are, in fact, manufactured for the specific purpose of being a symbol. My hope, albeit an ambitious one, is that by forcing the viewer to recognize the inherent hollow nature of these national symbols, they come away from the project able to more clearly see how symbolic representation is used as a tool by elites to manipulate society. The people creating these ideal identities are doing so as an incentive for the masses to gain belonging. Citizenship can be seen as a means for belonging. And going further, if belonging means adhering to a distinct set of values created by an ideal identity, the employment of that identity can be used as a tool for control. Key philosophical notions I employed during this project were empathy, discovery, and liminality. Through the application of these values, my aim was to pull back the skin and reveal the fullness, richness, and authenticity that lies in the soul of America, to discover something deeper about how this moment, right now, is transforming and reshaping the various colliding currents that make up America. In essence, my main goal with the images in this project was to portray a nuanced, poetic, an authentic visual encounter with America as a body politic. One of the biggest parts of the philosophy was empathy, and I referenced Terry Givens multiple times. Terry Givens authored the book Radical Empathy and outlined 6 key values in achieving the goal of radical empathy. Number 1, a willingness to be vulnerable. Number 2, becoming grounded in who you are. Number 3, opening yourself up to the experiences of others. Number 4, practicing empathy. Number 5, taking action. And number 6, creating change and building trust. While living in Canada for the past 2 years, I realized why the world pays so much attention to US politics. It's because the US is the guy in the room with the biggest gun, waving it around and screaming gibberish while everyone else looks on in horror, wondering if he's going to hurt himself or someone else. One of the participants in my film, Messiah, a black police officer I met after a party for the Hamel Rodeo, replied to my question about what it means to be an American, saying, "The idea of America is the best part about it. The worst part is also the idea of America." So as you've just seen, The Perfect Place has been one of the most ambitious projects that I've ever undertaken as an artist. And it presented me with numerous physical and psychological challenges while working on the road for that 2 months. You know, the old proverb that the journey is often more valuable than the destination certainly rang true while I was making this. But, you know, throughout the whole process, remaining open to the universe and just the sort of collisions that happened throughout, I was able to learn something profound about who I am, what my role is, and then most importantly, how I can make successful work as an artist. So that pretty much sums it all up. It's pretty hard to explain, you know, every single detail in such a big, expansive project in such a short time, especially for this video. So I hope you come away from this having learned at least a little bit about what I was trying to accomplish here. But if you'd like to learn more about the project and see more of the media that I created for it, like the film, or see some of the gallery installation images, I'll put a link in the description below where you can go check all that out. But I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of the project? What did you learn? Do you want to see more of stuff like this? Go ahead and drop a comment below and we can get a discussion started down there. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.